Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board meeting for Monday, April 17th, 2023. I see we have all members here, meaning a quorum. I know of no changes to the agenda. There are any that I'm not aware of. If not, you have received Jim's meeting notes for this evening. Are there any comments or questions about these? Can I have a motion to accept the meeting notes? Thanks, Craig. Second, please.
Second.
Second, Sean. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? You've all received the draft minutes of our April. You have to share cookies or something? You've received the draft minutes from the April 3rd meeting. Are there any corrections or additions anyone wishes to make?
I move we accept them.
Thank you, Edna. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Michael. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, it passes. Correspondence and announcements. Anything? Anyone? Okay. Then I think we can begin this evening's meetings with the new applications. We have 3 this evening. The first up is Honeybee Childcare, 21 Ferncliff Drive, site plan and special use permit for a daycare in the Ferncliff Nursing Home property. You want to step to the microphone and explain to us what you're looking to do.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Evans. I'm here to represent Honeybee Childcare. We're looking to put an early childcare facility at the Ferncliff Nursing Home.
I want you to continue explaining.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So the child care center will service about 44 children or less. We will be servicing children from the ages of 2 months until 5 years old, so right before they go to kindergarten. We will be open Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. To 6 p.m. We anticipate that some of the slots will be used by the staff at the nursing home, as well as they'll be open to the public as well. There will be a playground there, an infant playground and a preschool pre-K playground. So we're looking to get approval for a site plan in addition to the special use permit for intergenerational special use permit.
So this is the proposals for this to take place in the existing Ferncliff building. As you can see here, there are new pathways proposed, as well as two play areas here. One of the items that I just wanted to mention, I'm just going to go through these really quickly, is that there is, as you can see on the first site here, this is actually an existing graveyard on the site, and the plans did call for the contractor to use care. I do think that some type of fencing should be put on that to make sure that they don't begin with that area as the construction is being done for the sidewalk. That's a technical thing that can be discussed. Moving more into some of the thoughts about the project itself. If you've been here before, we talked about daycares. You know that I have a big concern about play areas near parking areas. Seeing number of cars jump curbs, go through buildings, things like that. They are proposing bollards here, which I think is great. It is something that helps keep the cars from advancing into this play area. This one is much further back, I will admit, than the other one. And there are some trees here, but it does kind of feel like something may still need to be here. Maybe it's not a line of bollards, maybe it could just be some well-placed stones or a bench that's well seated into the ground, but something to maybe fill the gap between a couple of these trees, just to help put something there as a block between the parking area and that play area. But I do know there's a fence and some, I guess, a retaining wall as well.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's also concrete-filled steel bollards that are going to be there to protect the playground from the cars. And that's on the plans as well.
Right, these right here, I think it's these dots right here. We just don't have them in front of these spaces up here, or up here. So I'm just looking at, if a car were to jump the curb, they might be able to get up here, so it might make sense to, again, I don't know if you just continue the bollards, or maybe just put something up here to kind of fill that space, because these are larger trees. It's not that they're small. But that's just something to consider as we move forward. We were given, I wouldn't call it an official traffic assessment, but or traffic plan, but we were given a traffic assessment of the trips that were going to be made. As we just heard, approximately 2/3 of them are anticipated to be made for staff that's already there at Ferncliff. But the total number of trips to me don't seem to be that significant. I do think with the assessment made, unless the board thinks otherwise, that I don't really see an issue of significant potential increased trip generation from this proposed use. That's my take on it at this time. Regarding the play area itself, it looks like one of the retaining walls and the fence that's going to be used may exceed 6 feet in height. If that's the case, we need a special use permit for that fence because it's over the permitted height. So that's something you should ask the engineer to take a look at. Maybe we'll get a copy of these notes. I didn't see a proposed sign. Are you proposing any signage?
As of right now, I don't believe so.
Okay. If there wasn't any signage, you'd have to come in for a permit or get a permit for this.
I don't know if that, thank you.
And that is it. A couple things just to take a look at, consider plugging in here.
Who's the fence that might be over 6 feet?
I believe it's this one here on this retaining wall. I have to look back at it. Just so as you proposed the wall, retaining wall and then a fence on top of it. Double check the exact locations. I don't know exactly where it was, but they did find some of them over 6 feet. So we just need to make sure if it is, then we get a proper fence.
So is that play area somewhat elevated from this
I don't
rental?
know.
It's got a retaining wall.
Right, so that's why we did have a sufficient enough for the cars and retaining wall. So the car would have to go up over the concrete wall to get to the playground.
Like I say, there are bollards here, which I want to see what this close.
Yes.
This one is not as big a concern, these are bigger trees. I just happen to see there's a gap here that raises a little bit of concern. It's 2 car lengths away. It's just, again, it's something I raise whenever I see players next apartment.
That is a very valid concern.
Other planning board members, questions, comments?
I think it's a good idea for a number of reasons. Childcare we need, and very often it's a generational, safety, investments in this and things of that sort as well as helping our staff. So I think this would be something that would be good for our
I
community.
can't hear you, Michael.
I think it would be good for our community.
I also especially appreciate that you're looking at about 2/3 of the population is going to be from people who actually already work there. And just from a sustainability standpoint, that eliminates the number of car trips that you need to take around town. So whenever we can capture those economies, I think it's a good positive thing.
I would just share that we had another situation in town not too long ago where a children's nursery school daycare facility was going into an assisted living or long-term care facility. And they worked together to develop a program where the children often either did parades or, they brought in seniors to read to the children. And the integration of those 2 generations was really a very positive thing. It was an outcome of that application. So I don't know if you have that in mind as thinking about something that would be part of your program, but I would encourage that.
At our Poughkeepsie site, where I currently work at, we have a relationship with the landing, which is also a nursing home as well. So the kids call them grandmas and grandpas. We go over, we do Christmas sing-alongs.
Yeah, great.
We do planting, we do a lot of things to definitely for that generational. And they just light up, it gives them a lot of energy. So yes, we're looking forward to doing this.
Wonderful. I think that's a great thing to integrate into your project.
Yes.
Okay, if there's nothing else, I think we have a draft procedural resolution.
So for the board's consideration tonight, a draft procedural resolution accepting the application for further review by the planning board, advisors, and the public, classifying it as type 2 under seeker, which coordinated environmental quality review included. Schedule a public hearing for May 15th, no earlier than 6:15 p.m. Recommend the clerk to undertake posting as needed. We'll send this to the CAB for review. We'll send this to the Waterfront Advisory Committee for review because it is within the local waterfront revitalization area. We'll go to HAPAC because it is a historic site. And we'll also go to Dutchess County Planning for review because it is a site plan submission. We need 2 planning board members.
I'll go.
I'll go with Craig. Okay, I have a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Thank you, Michael. Second, please.
Second, please.
Thanks, Delise. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? The motion carries. We'll be in touch with you to arrange for the site visit.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Have a good evening. The second new application under consideration this evening is Alex Miller, 75 Grinnell Street, site plan and special use permit for the installation of a heat pump. Good evening.
So we have a glass pool enclosure that was at the house when we bought it in 2015. And there was a lot of water damage that sort of underbuilt itself over time. And we recently did a bunch of repairs to the inside of the pool enclosure to repair the water damage. And one of the things that our contractors working on that suggested was the installation of some sort of climate control in order to reduce the likelihood of future water damage inside of this glass structure. And so our application today is for the installation of a mini split ductless heat pump. It's one of those, and then one of the outdoor units that is right behind the town hall is the same size, the same setup. And we go right there on the side of our house. And we've talked to our neighbors. The neighbors have no objection to this. It's a wooded area behind the house. There's a number of trees and shrubs back there, so it's not viewable from the street. It's barely viewable from one neighbor who said he does not object. It's not viewable from our other adjacent neighbor. And so we request that the public hearing on this be waived, the sort of further application materials regarding more complete site plan be waived, because this is a pretty small unit. It's like 2 feet by 3 feet, the house condenser, and the inside unit is obviously going to be viewable to others.
Okay. Jim?
Yep, so it is one mini split heat pump for the pool enclosure. It doesn't appear to create any planning or environmental issues as far as we can tell. We have looked into and not identified any historic preservation issues. The house was built in 1948, and while there is something in the historic resource survey, it talked about it being a functional landscape. That landscape will actually change since that was done, as the house has been built. And it did talk about the HAPAC, we don't have any issues there. This was just stated, a request has been made for a waiver of the public hearing and full site plan requirements. I don't see any issues with this. If this were outside of Rhinecliff, we wouldn't even be seeing it, I don't believe, under most circumstances. He does have letters from the neighbors which we've looked at, and based on everything I can see from the materials submitted, I don't see any issue with that. But that's obviously a planning board decision. So for your consideration tonight, I did provide either a draft procedural resolution or an approval resolution that would include a waiver of the statement.
Okay. Opinions from planning board members?
I think that given the insignificance of this, from a planning standpoint, legal standpoint, I think the approval resolution is appropriate.
I agree.
Anyone object to moving directly to the approval resolution? All right. Let's look at that then.
So for the board's consideration tonight, a draft waiver and approval resolution for the application by Alex Miller for site plan special use permit for installation of the mini split heat pump for the existing pool enclosure within the RCO. Classifying the action as type 2 under seeker, for which the environmental quality review is precluded. And finding that the proposed installation of the mini split heat pump for the existing pool enclosure creates no planning or environmental issues. And at the request of the applicant upon discussion at the public meeting held today, April 17th, 2023, hereby waiving the requirements for public hearing for section 12577. And accepting submitted application materials as requirements of the town code have been found not to be requisite in the interest of the public health, safety, or general welfare for this project, consistent with Town Law Section 274B, which permits waivers of special use permits. Essentially just stating the criteria for which we will be proceeding forward with with an approval tonight and this waiver. Beyond that, with respect to the application for special use permit, finding the proposed work and intended use to be consistent with the general standards for special use permits, and asking the board to grant special use permit conditioned upon site plan approval. And for site plan approval, asking the board to consider the proposed work and intended use to be consistent with Town Code Chapter 125, Section 12575, which is the site plan requirements and regulations, including the materials submitted dated March 27, 2023. And then asking the applicant to meet the 3 criteria listed under 4B.
All right, could I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second, please.
I'll put the board, Craig,
Aye.
Edna,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Louise,
Aye.
and I vote aye. We love the new project. The last new application that we're looking at this evening is Rachel Patak, is that the way to pronounce it? Or Patak? 108 Salisbury Turnpike, site plan and wetlands permit, parking plans. Good evening.
Hi.
Let us know what you'd like to do.
Sure. So I'm Rachel. I'm the founder of Current Deceased. We make black currant liqueur, and recently moved our operation to Salisbury Turnpike. And we're seeking site plan approval to add some parking spaces to that site, as well as a wetlands permit approval and a sign approval, so that we can open a small tasting room operation where people can come and see what we're up to. It's going to be one of the only places where people can learn about blackcurrants and interact with them, given their weird history in the U.S. as being illegal to grow for most of the 20th century.
What would you like us to know about this?
There's us. All of the structures that you see on there are previously existing. We're really only looking at the parking spaces that are directly across from that front barn, and then these ones here to the back. Just creating places for people to go when they come to visit us, and making a smooth flow for the property.
I believe you had some renderings in your package about the facade of the building and some other things that might be useful for the public to see.
Yeah, if we have those, and we want to bring those up, those show just the space itself and the proposed sign locations.
Sorry, I usually have these drawn up in advance, but.
It should be a PDF, I would think.
So I'm just looking.
Oh, it might be in there. Yeah. So that's the barn where we produce, and we're proposing doing a painted C, which is our logo that you see there on the front of the barn between those two windows, and then just a wooden engraved and painted sign in the front area. Something like that.
Keep coming back.
Questions from planning board members?
Is that the building where this, what is going on in the Red Barn?
Yeah, the red barn is where we manufacture the liqueur. And then within the manufacturing space, sort of right in those doors, because of the barn doors and the little awning, right through there, we're carving out a very small retail space that would act as a tasting and as sort of windows into our production. So it would invite people to understand a little bit more about the agriculture process involved in what we do.
So people would drive into the drive, go to the parking area, and then walk back?
Which is, yeah, so like
Yeah.
that barn is the view that you saw,
Right.
the doors are, yeah, exactly, right there where the house was. So the first set of stops are directly across from the barn, and the others are just down further there, and there's sort of like a path-laden gravel
It's,
drive.
Quite a few parking spaces. Do you anticipate that many people all at once?
Not particularly, we have a very small tasting room drawn out, it's got 3 bar seats, got all the number of people I want to deal with face-to-face in there, and a couple of outdoor seats. It's more that, we have 4 people, myself included, who work in the operation, and then if there were to be an additional 18 people, then we want to make sure we have 6 of them, it's a pretty modest.
So I do recall it, we did include staff as part of the, some of that lower parking area would accommodate staff as well as.
Yeah, so like the furthest away would be for
staff.
myself and staff.
So there'd be a total of 4.
Yeah.
It's just that whenever I've gone to a place like this, I haven't seen that much parking. Unless there are other kind of events going on or more people.
No, nothing else. I mean, most of the other operations that have tasting rooms are at a much larger scale. If you think about like Rose Hill or Lasting Joy or any of those places have probably upwards of 50 parking spaces. I think our idea was mostly just to make it so that it wasn't a cluster when people are coming in and
Rachel, did we talk about lighting? No, we did, didn't we?
We mentioned it briefly, there's the 2 down lights that already exist on the front of the barn, and then our idea for the hours of operation are all in daylight, so there's not a substantial plan for lighting.
Right. I know we talked about path lighting, if you were going to be open late in October, for example, in the evening until 8 o'clock or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we'd probably adjust our hours to only be open during the day. We're not really interested in being a nighttime operation.
Other planning board members, questions? We come to Jim. Jim, would you like to make comments?
But you want to, so and the parking and the drive are not, none of them would be paved?
No.
Dirt and gravels?
Yeah.
Okay. It makes a difference, it's.
Correct.
New parking, it's not paved. So there are 3 items, actually 4 items that I found, and I'm gonna get a copy of my notes later, I'll go take a look at these and figure out where you want to go. I think the sign is too big, that you're proposing. The 2 signs together, I don't think are permitted. I can't tell you, we've run into this before, that the sign regulations for commercial use are very strict.
Okay.
So you're gonna have to take a look at the sign sizes that you're proposing. The sign on the barn, as well as the sign that you're proposing out front, I think are going to go over the maximum that's permitted in the code. And
Do you know what that maximum is?
well, you can look at the, I have it written in my notes here. What you're proposing right now, and I had to estimate it, so I didn't have exact measurements of the sign, it's just post to post type thing, but I'm estimating you're at about 25 square feet of sign area for that sign, and, no, so 25 square feet for one in the barn, and 7 square feet for the sign out front of the single sign, for a total of 31.9. So I think you'll have to take a look at the sign code and see, the sign up front, I think, is definitely going to be oversized. It's 36 by 36, 3 by 3. So we'll take a look at those, just take a look at those standards, and then we can talk about that.
Okay.
And come back. I think you should contact NISDOC just to make sure that the driveway access permit will be valid for this use, which is obviously not a commercial use of this intensity on site right now, so just make sure that they don't have any issues with your accessing state highway to get into the driveway. If you can just get that in writing, by email or something stating that they don't have an issue.
Okay.
Fine. I know this doesn't directly impact what you're proposing to do, but the property that this is on has several accessory structures. And as part of the review by the planning board, we need to take a look and make sure everything is up to code. There are more accessory structures than are permitted without having permission to put them there essentially, unless they are considered to be agricultural. So I think
All
we'll have
ag.
to. all structures considered agricultural?
I mean, everything's purpose on that property besides the residence is agricultural in nature.
They use for active agriculture use?
Yeah.
All right, well, you can take a look at that note, but that may take care of that issue. And then the other issue is just related to what's already been discussed, which is the parking spaces. 20 of the proposed 26 spaces are in the buffer. That's something we need to really discuss in detail at the planning board level. I understand you're trying to spread them out from where they are, but that is an issue we typically talk about at the public hearing. So, the wetlands permit, she did submit, right? You submit wetlands?
I did.
So wetland permit has been submitted because those are within the wetland buffer.
Yeah, I mean, the learning that it was a wetlands was something that happened during our pre-conference. They're very subtle ponds and, you know, some very small water flow that I would never have anticipated was a wetland. So like the parking spaces that we're proposing, as far as like what you see and what already exists, have very minimal impact. It's like there's already solid ground in those places. It's not like we're pushing dirt into what, you know. I just want to be clear about what the nature of the wetland situation is on the property.
Still within the buffer, so we need to look at
Yeah.
it from that perspective. Okay, so that was something for the planning board to discuss. The two things I think we'd definitely like to see before the public hearing would just be, anything you get from the ISDOT saying that you don't have any issues with accessing the road for this particular use, and just double check the signage, and if we have an issue, we'll talk about that. That's something you have to do. And maybe you do one or the other. I have some thoughts in here about some other potential options. There are a bunch of different sign types you can use, and maybe something that's small that's hanging off the corner of the building might work, or in front of the barn. So take a look at what the standards are, and then see what you think.
And what are these tiny houses?
There are two tiny houses on the lot. They're labeled as tiny houses.
Where are they?
So I think the idea is that they would potentially house someone who was working with the land. So if, further agriculture is happening, that
They would be residents.
They were approved as agricultural housing for farmers.
I can't hear you, Michael.
They were approved for agricultural housing for farmers.
That's why I asked the
A
question.
number of years ago.
That's why I asked the question about agriculture. Because an agricultural structure, it has a different.
So they're not viewed as accessory dwellings?
They're permitted because it's used for active ag. That's the differentiation.
Rachel, if you want me to speak to that.
Yeah, Morgan, whose property is here also, if there are any outstanding questions, you
If you wouldn't mind just speaking to
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so having worked on this barn for years of trying to figure out how to make farming work in this area and be with the master plan in New York State about what people say they want to have our country, like our county look like and agricultural land look like. We worked really hard to work and build this barn into something that can be used creatively for what was once a small dairy farm, which, as we all know, does not work financially. So looking at the ways that we could make both a functional farming business work. We've done cattle there, and we've also worked on having this worker housing piece of trying to figure out how we can offer to offset workers' cost of living in the area. It's not done yet, so that's why, partially done. We haven't finished the kitchen, and there's going to be a garage that we're proposing later, so that it can actually be a place that works for people to live in, because this is very tiny. But this feels like a really good match to us as far as figuring out how to use locally grown produce and appreciate what the land has to offer, teach people about farming, and also teach people how to sustain a business, because it's really hard to be a farmer here. So we appreciate this collaboration and think it's going to be a good one. So, and preserving the barn, making it work, which I feel like is a tricky business to do. So we really feel like Rachel and this company is pretty cool to see it made here, and also like most of this produce is grown, which will be grown. We are going to plant on the land as well and produce some there, but like, it's all grown within 10 miles, right? So it's really, truly our area and a good story. So, happy to answer more questions if there's any, but.
Thanks, Lily.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one thing, are there any crops being produced currently? Is there any livestock?
It's pasture.
Agriculture
Yeah.
really means
Oh, definitely.
production of crops and.
Definitely, yeah, no, so we've had, I mean, the pandemic did shift things quite a bit, but we've had cattle on the land since we moved here 8 years ago. And worked with different farmers. We're slow, used to have a bar over in Kingston, and all the beef would go over there while we could, and then the pandemic really shifted that. But yeah, the cows are gonna be, it's seasonal, because it's really grassland, and we don't have the facility. The barn used to be used to house them. It was dairy farm, like I said. So we shifted to more of a meat facility. You know, so we didn't want to overwinter them working crazy, so we work with farmers locally.
But there is livestock there, at least seasonally,
Yeah,
part of the year.
over in, well, yeah, so this is where we're talking here. This is where the cattle are. So it's quite, you can, there's a small area, and that's some of the accessory buildings that you would see as the run-in for the cattle. But it's up, but there's a ridge, it's quite a.
And the people who live in the tiny houses work on the farm.
Well, nobody lives in the tiny houses right now, because we haven't completed. One is, basically, it's really, one is a bedroom and bathroom, and the other is a kitchen. So it's, because tiny homes are too small for people to really live in. I mean, you can do it, but it's really too small for most people to actually live in. So one has been designed, we went through the whole health department and and working out the permits for this so that we have one bathroom, one kitchen, and the kitchen's not done yet. So, I mean, it's not an open permit because we didn't hold
Okay. I'm just trying to get my head around the concept of agriculture and how it applies to this particular application.
It's worth noting that I also have an agricultural background, and we have a farmer on staff and plans to be growing
Right.
a lot of what we use.
Did you indicate that you've already planted some bushes?
We've planted some black currants already in the front, and then we're working on plans for a much larger
And
planting.
doesn't the ag markets allow you a certain period of time?
Totally, yeah, there's it's not exactly specified, but they say a few years for development. So like black currants, for example, they reach maturity and start to bear fruit around 3 years. They'll do it after 2, but 3 is really when they start to hit their stride, so it does take time to establish those. Thankfully, we live about 10 minutes away from like the godfather of black currants in the Northeast, who was instrumental in overturning the ban in 2003. So we get all our fruit from Greg Quinn, who's right down the road in Statsburg.
Are there any septic issues?
And just to speak to what you're saying, really, to be able to offer housing to somebody who wants to do agricultural work
I understand.
is hugely valuable,
Sure.
to be able to have somebody who's willing to do that work.
Right.
So that's really why we've been developing this infrastructure.
And a lot of the issues that you mentioned about farming and agriculture are very real, and they're interrelated with other land use issues, like
Yeah.
having commercial businesses and tourism kind of elbowing out that essential industry.
Yeah.
So
And that's why we,
I think we need to be very careful about how we draw our lines, so I'm just
Yeah.
trying to.
no, I appreciate that, and that's why we're doing it, because we believe that if you don't give housing to people who want to work in agriculture, It doesn't exist.
How does the septic work for the tiny house that has a bathroom and I guess also the kitchen?
Yeah, so this is where the septic field is, right here. So this is gravity fed. So this just goes there from the barn, which had to cross over the stream. That's a pump system, which is, double alarmed. It's quite sophisticated. It took about a year to design and make that happen with the health department.
Everything's on a well though. So power goes up, no water, no septic.
Right, yeah, well, we have two wells, one for the house,
Right.
and the house actually feeds the tiny home, the well there, and we have a generator for the house. So the tiny homes are protected, there's no generator for the barn.
So I did ask if there's county health equipment, I did note, I didn't mention it, but in my notes, I did mention that I think we should have county health sign off on it and make sure they're okay with it. I know you've obviously done some previous work with them, but make sure they're okay with it, this use.
I'm in touch with Dave about things right now, and we're getting an engineering study done by the site engineer, so that Dave can have that and sign off on things.
Good. Anything else? Anyone else? All right, we have a draft procedural resolution.
The draft procedural resolution for the board's consideration tonight for the application, site plan and wetlands permit for the distillery tasting room on 108 Salisbury Turnpike, in the RC5, accepting the application, supporting documents as further reviewed by the planning board, supervisors, and public, classifying actions type 2 under seeker, for which for the environmental quality review is precluded, scheduling a public hearing for May 15th, no earlier than 6:15. We will send this on to county planning for review since it is site plan. We will send it on to CAD as a referral, and need to designate two planning board members for site.
I was asking myself, why did I pick a nursery school and not a distillery?
Can I take it back? Thank you both.
Okay, Elise and Sean have volunteered, thrown themselves on their swords to go check this out.
Maybe I'll go as the CAD liaison.
Oh, there it is. I could go as the HAPAC liaison. Okay, so they'll be in touch with you about scheduling a site visit. Could I have a motion to accept the draft procedural resolution?
So moved.
I have a motion somewhere, and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, thanks very much. That concludes the new application portion of this evening's meeting, and we'll now move into the public hearings. The first public hearing, which was scheduled for this evening, is Catherine Whitman, 16 Oak Brook Road, site plan review, proposed single-family dwelling. It's my understanding that we are still needing information from the Department of Health.
And she did send in the wetlands permit, and she's fine with being informed.
She's asking to be continued.
She's waiting for ZBA as well.
Okay, so we have a request to continue the public hearing until the June 20th meeting. Could I have a motion to that? Thank you, Michael. Second.
Second.
Delise, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions. Okay, the next public hearing this evening is Alderkill, Carl Duncanberg, 15 Vollenbecker Road, sketch plan and major subdivision. Jim, I believe we're going to start off this evening talking about the four-step process. Is that correct?
I was going to pull up the zoning for a minute. So as we've discussed several times in the past, there's a four-step process for conservation subdivision as it's outlined in the town zoning code. And I pulled up the town zoning code itself so that we can look at this as I run through it. We have four-step design process. There's 125.43. 3. We have discussed this in the past. I believe I have asked planning board members for kind of their general thoughts on the four-step process and whether or not they thought things were generally consistent with the four-step process, and I think we had general agreement that they were, but we never actually went through and took kind of a formal vote on that, and I think it's important that we do so for this to make sure that it's in the record how the planning board feels about the four-step process. We've been doing the project for a while and felt it was, I think it's time to discuss the 4 steps and see kind of where we stand. So I guess the first thing I'd like to do is essentially just run through it and ask for the planning board's thoughts or consensus on each of the steps. The first one is delineation of open space lands, essentially asking that we go through and determine that the delineation of open space that has been provided by the subdivision meets the code as is written here. The primary conservation areas delineate, floodplains, wetlands, buffers, significant habitat, biodiversity, steep slopes, things like that. And that it meets the priorities and requirements of what we hope to see for conservation subdivision preserved open space. So I guess since I've never done this with the board before with the conservation subdivision. Any thoughts on this one?
My recollection from the mapping that we have seen, and I have been on the property before, the areas of significance environmentally, I believe, have been set aside, which I think is one of the main, the first thing to look at. The wetland areas, some of the other aspects of the hydrology network. As everyone knows, there's a number of wetland complexes in that whole part of Schoolhouse Road, that whole section there, as well as the headwaters for the Landsman Kill. We know that there are, on parts on the property adjacent to this, there are eagles nesting there, there are Blanding's turtles, and so we know that this area is, from a habitat standpoint, is incredibly rich. And as I recall, from looking at the set-asides for the land that would be preserved, those issues were taken into consideration. The houses are being proposed, from having walked on that property some time ago, strikes me as being placed in the least environmentally sensitive portion of the property if one were to do development on it. So I believe that step 1 was faithfully completed.
Other members of the planning board? Are you comfortable that you support that step 1 has been completed adequately?
Yeah, I'll go along with what Michael had said. I also looked at some of the natural resource inventory mapping. I'm trying to overlay it with the area, and it does seem like, even though it's significant, the area that's being set aside is devoid of formal protection of other kinds. So encumbering this with a conservation easement is positive and will benefit the natural resources of the community.
At the end, are we looking for a resolution or consensus that the 4-step process has been accomplished, or do we do them individually with each of the 4 steps?
I thought it'd be good just to go through each of the 4 individually, just to see if there are any comments on them, but at the end, I do think we can take one vote. I think it'd be good to have a vote in the record,
Okay.
of years and days, whether you do agree or
All right,
not.
anyone wishing to comment on step 1? Okay, then let's look at step 2.
Step 2 is the location of the house sites. If you remember, the house sites are located over toward the one edge of the property. You have the conservation subdivision land kind of in the middle, and then the remainder of the property is being retained with the existing house on the west side,
Sort of
east side,
northeast.
northeast side.
Northeast side.
So it's kind of in 3 parts in a way. I am looking to bring up that map as we talk. Right. Any thoughts on the layout of the lots themselves?
There we go.
Well, they seem positioned to meet the requirements. They're as far away as conceivably they can be from important environmental features.
agreement with this statement. Step 3.
Step 3, alignment of streets and trails upon designating the house sites. Street and trail plans should be designated to provide vehicular access to each house and pedestrian access to open space if appropriate. Essentially looking to make sure that the roads, streets, driveways are all laid out in a way the planning board feels makes sense.
Comments?
We've certainly been discussing this issue quite a bit, I think, as a planning board. I know that there's some questions about some of the engineering aspects that need to be looked at. But it does seem when they are laid out, the places the least intrusive into the property itself.
You pull your mic a little closer.
Sorry. And I think that, we recognize that as we go further, there may be a few other engineering issues that we have looked at. But based upon where the houses are situated, or where the conservation area is, it seems that the locations make the most sense, particularly given the access point on that, what is it, site A, that piece of the property that goes out and joins up to Buckingham.
Anyone else? Okay. Last step, step 4.
Last one is the drawing. Drawing of the lot lines upon completion of 3 preceding steps, which essentially have been taking place over the last, I guess, year and a half now that we've been reviewing this. Lot lines are drawn and is required to delineate the boundaries of the individual residential lots as well as the open space. So this is what has been proposed. So the question would be, the lot lines drawn in a way that you think makes sense, laid out.
Comments regarding lot lines?
They seem fine to me.
Do they make sense in general?
Yes.
Well, that would conclude the review of the 4 steps.
Correct, so I think the next step would be to ask the board to consider just taking a vote on whether you believe that the 4-step process has been followed appropriately and to your satisfaction, and recorded in the record to, I guess, close out the 4-step process.
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
I will actually call the board. Craig?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Elise?
Aye.
And I vote aye. All right. So next this evening, we would like to talk about a determination of significance, and I'm going to ask Jim to take the lead on this.
So, as part of the review that we thought made sense to take place along with kind of assessing the 4-step process, which essentially we've been doing all along, and evaluating what's been proposed against the criteria and conservation subdivision regulations. We thought the next good step would be to actually essentially walk ourselves through the seeker form and see if we have any issues with the 11 questions that are involved in the short environmental assessment form for part 2. And then I would actually like to discuss some of the elements of the determination of significance, which would be included in a seeker resolution. Seeker resolution draft has been included with my planning board memos for quite some time, since one of the original meetings was maybe the first public hearing, but somewhere thereafter. And so what I would propose if the board is going to look at seeker resolution after we go through the part 2, depending on where we end up there, will be to talk about these items and add that to a seeker resolution when we get to that point. So as we've done before, although this will be shorter than we do part 1, I would like to go through each of the environmental impact form questions with the board to get your input and thoughts on each of the items. This I can actually put on the screen. So this is a state form, it's a seeker form. This is a type 2 action, but there is a short environmental assessment form that's included. And I'll just go through the questions. First one, in your opinion, from the planning board, do you feel the proposed action will create a material conflict with an adopted land use plan or zoning regulations? Before you answer, I do want to point out that the conservation subdivision is the required subdivision type in the subdivision code. In order to do a typical subdivision, you actually have to get approval from the planning board to not do a conservation subdivision. So with that, I will open it up to you as to whether or not you think it meets, whether there's no or small impact will occur, or moderate to large impact will occur as it relates to item number one.
Members?
I would say small and no impact.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Does anyone disagree with no or small impact? So no one sees a moderate to large impact in question number one. Is that correct?
I do not.
Okay.
So Jim, I think this is an unlisted option, I think you may have said type two.
Yes, it's not a type one, but yes. Right. It requires a short environmental impact. Second question, will the proposed action result in a change in the use or intensity of the use of land?
Well, obviously, since it will be developed, it's going to be a change in the intensity of the land.
So it would be no or small impact or a moderate to large impact?
I think it's a no or small impact. It's land that is open to be developed in this way, and it's following all of the requirements of a conservation subdivision.
And with the conservation easement on it, it's preserving the most valuable ecological aspects of the property, which is certainly not going to balance against the development.
So you would see it as a mitigation against the
Yeah.
development.
I would agree with that.
Does anyone disagree with no or small impact? Therefore, all are in favor of no or small impact, correct?
Yes.
Number three.
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community?
I think no.
There is residential development certainly in that area, as well as a good deal of open space. This basically runs into both of those when it's proposed at this time. So I would say probably it does not have an impact, not the otherwise expected, if the land around it had been used and currently exists.
Well, I think impact is, you know, I don't think you can argue there's no impact, but I think the word for me, the operative word is impair. And I find that to be different than, you know, an impact. That's my opinion. I'm working off the word impair, and I don't think that this impairs necessarily the character or quality.
Good point.
Others?
I agree with you. I think there's obviously some impacts related to the community that live there, which is why a lot of this conversation that we've seen over these meetings has happened. But the impair is the catch point, which I think does make it fall into the first box.
Into the no or small impact. Okay. Others?
I agree.
Okay. Four.
Number four, will be a no. Will the proposed action have an impact on the environmental characteristics that cause establishment of the CEA? We do not have any CEAs in the town, so the answer to that is no. Number five, will the proposed action result in an adverse change in the existing level of traffic or affect existing infrastructure for mass transit, biking, or walking? No or small impact, or moderate to large impact?
Say no or small.
No or small?
I would agree.
And we could point out that there will be no public use of this property, right? That is not part of this application, nor will there be any kind of special building to work with the conservation easement.
Thus eliminating any potential traffic associated with anything like
This
that.
would be ordinary residential traffic.
Anyone else? No or small impact?
Yes.
Number six.
Will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy and fails to incorporate reasonably available energy conservation or renewable energy opportunities? This by definition is a subdivision. I think this is intended more of structures themselves. Myself, I believe, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but any structure that's built would have to meet, this Michael, would have to meet the current energy code.
Yes, and because that's the uniform public building code, yes.
But anyway, so I'll leave it at that. So any thoughts?
No or small impact?
Yeah.
Anyone see it differently?
I agree.
I agree.
Number 7.
Will the proposed action impact existing public or private water supplies?
No.
No.
Public or private wastewater treatment utilities?
No.
Number 8, will the proposed action impair the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources?
No.
No.
No, there aren't any there.
We did have phase 1. Will the proposed action result in an adverse change to natural resources, wetlands, water bodies, groundwater, air quality, flora, or fauna?
No, in fact, it will help preserve them.
I do think it's important to note that there is an impact on the wetland, but a permit was received from New York State DEC for that impact.
For the driveway.
For the driveway.
Can you just provide a little more clarification on that? Even though there is a wetlands permit, are we supposed to not suggest that there's still an impact happening? Or just
Well, it's no or small impact or a large impact. I think because DEC has permitted that impact to the wetland itself, that we would go with their finding on the wetland itself. Certainly, you're welcome to make whatever.
No, that's it.
So that's where I would land on it.
I agree, I'm just
I'm not
curious.
sure we're here to disagree with the DEC permit.
No.
Well, and I think to the extent that Edna alluded to, the set aside of the conservation easement, greatly enhances the ability to protect those natural resources. Are we in agreement that it's no or small impact?
Yes.
Number 10.
Will the proposed action result in an increase in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage problems? My understanding from talking with the town planning board, or town engineering consultant, is that he did have a couple questions about the SWIP, which is kind of the water plan, how things are going to run off and that kind of thing. But nothing that created an issue for him. It was a calculation issue. And if that calculation changes slightly, it's, I think, a paperwork issue mostly. But that was what I heard from him, that those issues can be worked out between him and the engineer.
So could potentially be a small,
Could potentially be a small impact if it increases
depending
once.
upon the engineering that it's actually defined and put into place.
So is there a sense that there's the potential for a small impact?
I think that's fair.
Does that seem reasonable to everybody else?
Yeah, I agree.
And number 11.
Will the proposed action create a hazard to environmental resources or human health?
No.
So with that, our run through of the short AF finds that the planning board has found no or small impact may occur for the 11 criteria that are listed in the seeker part 2. With that, in a seeker review, we would typically have a determination of significance. I'm not necessarily going to put this under part 3, though it could be. I think this should be included in the seeker resolution because that is something that's always kind of at the top of the file. And I think it's fine either way based on what I've been told. So I do have the seeker draft resolution, which again has been in my memos for a while, but I think that there is some detail that needs to be added to that. Whether I want to undertake the approval of seeker resolution tonight or not, I do want to mention some of the changes and thoughts that I've had related to that because it does fall in this kind of step with our discussion four-step process in doing part 2. And that is that the town Rhinebeck Planning Board in its rules and duly established lead agency under seeker and upon review of the completion of the short EF part 2 and associated information, took a hard look at this application and found the following. Concerns have been raised, discussions have been undertaken, and the planning board has listened to those over the last approximately year and a half with substantial, well, let's say with changes made to the plan based on those conversations. The conservation subdivision is a requirement in the code as the permitted subdivision type. subject to planning board approval. This is what the town wants to see happen. If you want to do a typical subdivision, as I noted earlier, you actually have to get special permission to do so. We've been reviewing this since mid-2021. So far, this project, again, just in terms of looking at this from the seeker and where we've been, what we're doing, there's 7 pages of comments that I have drafted for this 4-lot subdivision. We've had several reviews by the town engineering consultant and input and reviews and assistance from the town planning board attorney who's here tonight. We've now gone through the 4-step process and discussed that. We have gone through the Part 2 environmental impact and discussed those 11 items listed there. We've looked at items including the wetland buffer, wetlands themselves. We have seen the applicant secure a wetland permit from the DEC. We have comments from the fire department. We have comments from the highway department regarding the driveway and the location of those, and we discussed that as part of the 4-step process just a few minutes ago. A conservation organization has been identified by the applicants who essentially maintain and hold that land, and that land easement has actually increased in size since the original application. I don't remember what it was, 15, 20, 30 acres.
It's about 150% bigger than what's required by code, yeah.
So that's increased from the original application. The SWIP, the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan that I discussed earlier, that I have discussed with the town engineering consultant, is an item that he just wants to double check calculations on. We know that there has been a question raised about that, but he felt that that was something that could be addressed between him and the applicant's engineer. It's not typically something the planning board would get involved in the details of the numbers necessarily anyway. So that will be finalized, but he did not anticipate that that would create a significant issue as I previously mentioned. We've had a phase 1A and 1B completed. We did not get any issues from SHPO, even though this wasn't submitted to SHPO by the planning board. The submission was made, and we did receive a letter back from SHPO saying they had no issues. And based on my review of what's gone on over the last year and a half, and as you can see in my notes and we've discussed, I do believe that what's proposed meets Section 12543, which is the Conservation Subdivision Regulations. So, with that, if the planning board would like to, we do have the draft secret resolution we could discuss. I would add those elements to this to kind of help fill out some of the background of what's gone on as part of the process, because think well about the process, and include those items in that, which it has not been up to this point. We just did develop those actually today. So we do have a secret resolution for your consideration. Yeah, that's. So same secret resolution that's been up there, a typo that I was alerted to today that I fixed to make sure that it said Alderkill. And if you want to take this up as part of the discussion you have right now, I guess this is the time to do that, and if not, that's up for discussion, that's the board decision.
We just continue Part 2, and we get to the 4-step process. It seems like now is probably as good a time as any. Still light outside, so yeah,
Maybe Sean?
really.
Comments from other planning board members?
I'm sorry, what?
I'm asking if there are any comments or questions, either of Jim or of John and Kim who are here, regarding taking this next step.
What are the alternatives?
The alternative is you don't take up the secret resolution this evening. We've gone through the other steps to see where we stand. It was important. We've been talking about them on and off for a long time. I thought it was good for us to get through those officially and see where we stood. Because we've done that, I think we could take it up for consideration, but again, it's the board decision. I turn over to John and Kim for any thoughts on.
It's just a question of timing. I mean, you've gone through the Part 2 of the EAF, and if you feel that you're comfortable in being in a position to issue your determination of significance, you can do it tonight, or if not, you're going to have to do it sometime soon because it's one of the first parts of the process. So it's really just a timing
Is
issue.
there any reason not to do it tonight?
Not that I can see.
Then I think we should do it.
And let me just say that there are outstanding questions which I'll address in a minute that will be answered over time. So this doesn't end the process, it only closes out this particular piece of
The
it.
secret environmental
Right.
review process.
This is not approval of the project.
That's correct.
That's the second steps of the resolution, we're not talking about.
So we're moving to adopt the secret resolution as presented by you.
Correct.
I so-
With,
to the changes that.
with the lengthy list of things that have been,
Subject to a lengthy list of changes.
yeah,
Additions.
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 Only changes to the title of it.
Are you going to?
But
Oh, yeah, this is what I just read off.
this is what he just read off, and let me just say, it's obviously been captured for permanent installation in the archives. So, Jim will refer back to that, but that is the substance of what we will add to this secret resolution. Does someone wish to make a motion to adopt the secret resolution as outlined by Jim?
So moved.
Second.
Poll of the board. Craig?
Aye.
Edna? Louise?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Okay, now, I wanted to, there are some things that were raised at the last few meetings, in meetings, outside of meetings, and I want to update people on where we are with some of those. We had a lengthy correspondence from Mr. Ely raising a number of questions regarding uniform code issues. That has been referred to Ed Mag, who is our building inspector. Ed is the person tasked with that in the town government, and Ed will be reviewing that and responding to us as he's finished the review of all of the issues you raised, Mr. Ely. The fire department has also been recontacted because there were references to fire department concerns. As you know, we already have on file a letter from the fire department indicating they didn't have any issues. We have asked them to look at the most recent correspondence regarding that, to come back to us and tell us whether they have any concerns about the letter that they already issued. We have not heard back from them as of this point. As Jim alluded to, we are in correspondence with Christian Moore at CPL regarding closing out his questions or anything he may feel outstanding. And we have been corresponding and communicating with our attorneys, Grant and Lyons, and they obviously have a number of things that they wish to review. And they will tell us later this evening, I think, how long it will take them to get back to us. So I just wanted to update people that those things that have been brought to our attention in the past have not been overlooked. They have been, in my opinion, referred to appropriate parties who will take another look at them on our behalf and get back to us. I think unless there are comments or questions from the planning board at this point, I would turn to open it up for public comment. And let me just say that I'm going to ask people to limit their comments to 5 minutes, and I'm going to ask you to limit your comments to questions or concerns or issues that have not been raised in the past. They have to be brand new concerns. I don't want to be revisiting the same things that we've discussed or the things that I've just suggested have been referred on to other consultants working for us or for the town. I believe the person in the back had his hand up first.
So I'd like to start out by apologizing for a terrible analogy I used at the last meeting in my prepared remarks and had read here about the professional engineer's drawing. And it was important to make that apology up front because this has got to be a collaborative process. So I wanted to get that done up front. This is like I said before, this is a new use of Brentwood Lane. I think that it's okay to refer this to the fire code official, local fire code official, but state code is very clear that this is a decision that's made by the Secretary of State's office on whether a new use is allowed on Brentwood Lane.
This is an issue you've raised before? Is this an issue you've raised before?
It's in my letter, but
Then
it
I don't
doesn't.
want to go back over it tonight.
Okay, so the new part of that issue is I opened a file with the Secretary of State, but they can't act until such time as the town either requests a special approval or the town acts without one. So I just wanted to bring that up as new information. The other thing is at this point, the planning board is still not defined how many buildings will be on each lot, which is obviously important to the shared driveway, dead-end street, dead-end driveway issue. And I think that it's important that the town identifies how many buildings they're approving on each lot and the types of buildings that those are. And that should be part of any approval resolution because this is so key to what goes on with state code. I've offered up some language here on how to make a shared driveway work in item 3. The protection of the rights because state code runs on building count, not lot count. That I don't think that the planning board has done the appropriate steps here to protect everybody's rights with regards to building count versus lot count on the shared driveway dead-end street. And item 4, well, still on item 3, I've also opened a file with the Secretary of State regarding the dead-end driveway that's being proposed for Alderkill. And again, they can't act until the town either asks for, or sorry, the owner either asks for special approval or this board takes action approving something without that. Engineer of record, I believe that the town needs to have drawings that are marked suitable for construction, that are signed and sealed by a professional engineer, because at this point, the planning board has no attestation that those drawings either meet code or provide a safe design. And without those markings under state law, those drawings mean nothing. I used a bad analogy last time, but I want to make sure that this board understands that. The guide rail issue came up at the last meeting. I think that there was an unfortunate choice of language made by others about trespassing. The issue is encroachment. This is a 12-foot wide driveway, which is literally one lane of the New York State Thruway. New York State Thruway lane is 12 feet wide. When vehicles go in and out of there, their choice is to either back all the way up,
I
drive
believe
off.
we've been over the driveway issue repeatedly.
Okay, so I've offered some guide rail suggestions there for the board to include. And then map updates. The board has not talked about updating the maps that are on file with the county. Both map 7878 and 7935 need to be updated as part of this resolution. And then this resolution should also address the impacts that this board will be creating on Boldenbecker Road when all of those houses on the other side of this result from the subdivision that you're creating after you block off the through road with a conservation easement. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. Victoria Polidoro. Thank you for taking the concern seriously. I won't reiterate anything that any of the letters have submitted. I just want to know if the applicant has submitted any new information in response to any comments raised for this meeting.
No, I didn't see anything that we need to respond to.
The only thing that I have seen that I believe, and somebody can correct me, was a clarification about what has been bandied about as an education building.
Yes.
Would you like to answer, would you like to address that?
I heard Ms. Lockman discussing this.
Sure, yes. There are a number of...
I will ask you to.
There are a number of permitted uses in the conservation easement that we've agreed to with outlaw. Those are permitted uses according to a private land trust. They have nothing to do with what we're proposing. Ms. Polidoro is conflating something that would be allowed hypothetically by a land trust with what we are proposing on the site plan. Is simply spurious. The fact is, I've said to the planning board before, and I'm saying it again, the entirety of the project we are proposing is in our site plan and in our application materials, and that is the end of the story. Disturbance areas as displayed in the site plan are the disturbance areas proposed. There is no education building proposed. That was a reference to really what started as the person who owns lot 3 is also going to be responsible for taking care of the 45-acre preservation area. It's not a small job, as I know already. And so I asked for an additional 1,000 square feet to potentially build a barn someday, which of course would have to go through its own approvals process with the town. We have no plans for that, in the interest of being able to house a tractor or a bush hog or whatever would be needed to clear invasive species and do the things that a reputable land trust would want from, that's it.
So to be clear, there is no education center
Nope.
before the planning board in this application?
Correct.
Thank you. Victoria?
Okay, thank you. So then I just ask that the board continue the hearing until we have either answers or they submit the information or we can comment on them. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I won't rehash anything we've sent already before. What I haven't seen is a staging plan, so how the Alderkill proposes they're going to start the driveway. Essentially, when you make that left into the current driveway off of Buttonwood, you can think about it as your driver's side window crosses onto our property. So there's not a lot of room there to stage from. So how to stage without obstructing the ingress and egress. And then in response to what Carl said, the easement literature, I don't know if that is, it seems relevant, right? And it says recreational educational purposes. Educational usage shall include tours, classroom instruction, study, and experimental activity.
I think the point that's being made is, I'm not an expert on this, and perhaps John can chime in as well. I think oftentimes a conservation agency would like to see those things, and so they create an easement that would allow for that to take place. In this instance, that is not being proposed. And were it ever to be proposed, they would have to come back before the planning board, which would then run a separate review of that application.
Because it does say that the 1,000 square foot roof footprint is for educational activities in that specific document. It also says accessory residence for each property, and if there is no accessory residence, you have an apartment in each property for a separate household. So now we're talking about not only, let's just say, potentially 2 cars per lot, up to 4 cars per lot going through a 12
I
driveway.
think Victoria was asking for details on accessory.
Thank you.
Quick follow-up point.
Does this mean you get an extra 5 minutes, or am I
No,
giving you 2.5?
let's need a minute and a half, I promise. I've been in discussions with Oblong. Oblong indicated that the educational building is not their requirement. I think you have a misunderstanding of
It's
why the
not
building's
before
there.
us, it's not part of the application.
Okay, but you made a statement that I think
That
is
was my
incorrect, so I just wanted to
understanding.
point that out.
All right,
Thank you.
if I made an error, I apologize, but I will stand by the statement that it's not part of this application. Unless somebody can prove otherwise.
No, it's very clearly not part of the application.
It's not on the plan, it's not permitted, and it would have to come almost certainly back before the planning board. It would have to meet the code and be reviewed by.
It's common for easements very often to say that would be allowed on property, you just have to, whatever group you're working with. In our conservation easement, there are a number of things listed that they would permit on our property if we wish to do it. Among other things that are prohibited as part of the easement. But that doesn't mean they're part of any plan to do it. It's just that the holder of the plan, of the easement, would permit that to happen if we chose to do it. There's no choice, there's no desire here to put an education center on the property that's before us now. Therefore, if we approve this tonight, which we're not going to do, there could be no education building on that property.
Members of the public.
My name is David Bouchard, I live at 22 Button Lane, and I'd like to bring up the problem with my back having all these hemlocks, which is a fire hazard. And my concern is that the road construction may not meet the code for the trucks that would be using them to fight these fires. I've looked at your notes, and it says that the driveway as proposed is permitted, not required to be constructed to the town standards. If that's the case, that means to me that it's under construction. You have a policy under 101-2, all developments shall be designed to facilitate the fire and emergency protection access for firefighting and related equipment, in which the road does not accommodate those vehicles, only one. With an offset for one as you're passing.
Okay.
So my request is that the fire marshal inspect the plans and see if that meets his requirements to have this road changed, or it remains the same.
I believe that we have run it past the fire department, but we are, because let me finish, please. We are asking them to re-review that, and we can ask them to review your comment at the same time. But we do have already letters on file from them.
There's another letter that I wrote a long time ago requesting that performance bond be issued. Is that a requirement?
I don't know.
Well,
John,
it
do
is
you
for
know?
most subdivisions, so we're just...
Performance bond be required? I don't know the answer.
What would the performance bond secure?
I'm sorry?
What would the performance bond secure?
To secure that right of way, that passageway is not going to be interrupted by lack of money to fund it, to complete it. And Dr. can get his out without being interfered by obstructions of construction equipment and that.
Well, we'll take a look at that. There's authority within the zoning law to request that if the board thinks that that's necessary.
Thank you.
Jim has put up for everyone's review the letter that we have on file from the fire department. But as I said, because of some of the questions that have been raised, we have reached out to them again and have asked them to either confirm that this stands or to raise any other concerns that they might have. So I believe we've doubled back to all the important parties to confirm that this is their position.
And he's saying that...
I'm not saying what he's saying, Yeah, that's why we put it
It's
up.
very vague, so there's probably why he's got equipment that are almost gone.
I'm sorry, I'm not arguing with Mr. Amy this evening. That is the letter that he submitted to us on behalf of the fire department. So thank you. Anyone else? All right. Clearly, there are still questions that need to be answered, and our attorneys are going to be reviewing a number of things as are the other parties I mentioned. However, I would turn to my colleagues this evening and ask you if you feel you are in a position to close the public hearing, to continue to seek answers. Ken?
So I know that because there are some outstanding questions that are being reviewed by the consultants, before you consider closing the public hearing, you might want to ask Mr. Duncanberg if he's acceptable to granting any extensions that are needed.
Thank you, yeah.
Yes.
Alan, would you like to speak for the record on that? Kim is raising a point that I almost overlooked, which is we would need to get some extensions to be able to continue to get answers to these questions. And
yes, thank you, of course. Carl's plan is a good one. We're thankful for the time folks have devoted to it. And Carl will continue to work with the planning board and be flexible as to time periods. So Kim's answer, yes.
do we need to do anything formal with that, or just accept that as the granting of an extension.
That's sufficient. We're not up against a time period at the moment, but we wanted to know if the public hearing is closed, that we would be able to get extensions as necessary. There are a number of issues that have been raised by members of the public. The board does want to look into those issues. You've asked us to look into a number of those issues, and we will be doing that. We're going to need a little bit of time to come up with the answer.
And if I may, given that extension, we do request the public hearing be closed. The board's been incredibly patient. The issues have been noodled through thoroughly, and there are still issues to deal with. We understand. Thank you.
On the issue of drainage,
Drainage, was this part of Mr. Gorminski's report?
yes.
So we've heard it before.
Right, but we just asked that because it's an issue specific to my clients and their property,
Yes.
that they be allowed to continue to review the report as it comes in and provide comments. I mean, Mark is going to review it on their behalf, but if you close the hearing, you can't accept those
I understand.
comments from Mr. Gorminski.
Thank you for your comments. There's something.
Forgive me, this is just a procedural question. If you close the public hearing tonight and there are extensions later on, is there opportunity for the public to
Close the
comment?
public hearing, the public hearing is closed.
Thank you.
Yes,
Throw one more comment up there?
sure. As long as it's a new one.
It's a new one. It's a new one. Just was thinking about Miller Road. I don't know if you guys have driven up Miller Road, but there's a small bridge there, right? So it's a lot of trucks, a lot of big trucks coming through Mill Road. Is there going to be any accommodation by Alderkill to support those bridges? You know, whether, I imagine there's gonna be a lot of damage when 75,000-pound trucks are every day going over those little bridges, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Certainly.
On this issue of the public hearing, it presumes that the board doesn't know how to do its job, which it does. The public hearing section is informational gathering. That's been more than accomplished. There are things to do. Everything we've heard multiple times before tonight, including drainage. So I respectfully ask that the board close the public hearing. Thank you.
John and Kim, any comments?
No, other than to say that if you think you have sufficient information in front of you based on the public comment that's come in thus far, you can close the public hearing tonight. It doesn't mean that the investigation work that's being done by your consultants is going to be over. You have CPL doing some work, you're going to have our firm doing some work, you have Jim doing some work, all to answer the issues that have been raised by members of the public. If something significant were to arise that would require additional public comment, the public hearing can be reopened at another time subsequent.
Thank you for that clarification. That being said, planning board members, where do you think you are?
I would like to move to close the public hearing.
I agree with that.
I have a motion and a second. I would entertain any comments about that.
Ready to vote.
We'd like to vote. We'd like to call the question.
Call the question.
The motion, and I have a second. I will poll the board, Delise.
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Sean?
Aye.
Craig?
Yes.
Edna?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Okay, I think the only thing now is to schedule
Next time.
the next time this will be on the agenda. How much time would you
I'd like
like?
to ask for a couple of months.
Couple of months. So we're looking at coming back in June?
Yep.
Okay, what date?
June 20th.
June 20th? Does that work for everybody? Okay, we'll continue. We're going to take this up next on the agenda of the June 20th meeting. All right.
Want the resolution about that?
Sure.
Also move to resume on June 20th.
Okay, thank you. I have a second, please. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That concludes the business this evening. Could I have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Second, third, fourth. Thank you, everyone.